Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked here on the channel. This is the series where I talk about every single book on my shelves because a person appeared through a magical door in my room and said, hey, you should do this. And I agreed. Today we are going to be talking about one of my favourite series of all time, V.E. Schwab's Shades of Magic series. There's some intro music here, Some quick disclaimers before we start. I bought all the books in this series myself. Nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible. If you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, click away now. And lastly, I will link the story graph for the series below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. I would say probably for more kind of graphic injury description stuff in this more than anything else. Right off the bat, we're going to address the elephant in the room, or the elephant that is about to be in the room. The elephant is right outside. I'm about to let him in. My editions don't match. We're going to be okay with it. They're also in the wrong order right now. Hang on. They don't match. I own the UK special editions of the second and third book and the US special edition of the first book. I'm okay with it. I've made my peace with it, and so should you. This is a adult fantasy series from V.E. Schwab. I think it would work well if you're a person who reads a lot of YA. There's a lot of crossover elements there, but it is technically adult fantasy. The first book, A Darker Shade of Magic, came out in 2015, and it was followed by A Gathering of Shadows in 2016 and A Conjuring of Light in 2017. They are fantasy books. On the Google Books page, it says historical fantasy. I don't know that I would necessarily agree. It's definitely pitched at like a particular period of time in general, but it's very much more here's the vibes of this period of history, which is kind of, I guess, in my head it's very Napoleonic almost, but that might just be me imagining things. I feel like it's historical in the aesthetic, but it's not actually a historical book, right? V.E. Schwab, if you haven't already heard of her, please go check out some of the various other videos on the channel from the last few weeks. We've been going through basically her entire back catalogue. She's an author who's written loads and loads of things. I highly recommend these. These are probably the thing I would recommend you read first, but more on that anon. Allow me to read to you from the blurb of the book. Welcome to Grey London, dirty and boring without any magic, with one mad king, George III. I guess it's Georgian, that would make more sense. Then there is Red London, where life and magic are revered, and White London, a city slowly being drained through magical war down to its very bones. And once upon a time there was Black London, but no one speaks of that now. Officially, Kell is one of the last, I'm going to say Antari, I think it might be Antari, but I'm not certain, magicians with a rare coveted ability to travel between parallel Londons and acts as an ambassador and messenger between the Londons in service of the Moresh Empire. Unofficially, he's also a smuggler, which is a dangerous hobby for him to have, as proved when Kell stumbles into a setup with a forbidden token from Black London. Fleeing into Grey London, Kell runs afoul of Delilah Bard, a cut purse with lofty aspirations who first robs him, then saves him from a dangerous enemy, and then forces Kell to spirit her to another world for a proper adventure. But perilous magic is afoot, and treachery lurks at every turn. To save all of the worlds, they'll first need to stay alive. Prepare to be dazzled by a world of parallel Londons, where magic thrives, starves, or lies forgotten, and where power can destroy just as quickly as it can create. We have this kind of story of these two characters, Kell and Delilah, or Lila as she is known in the books. Very different people who come together, who are brought together by adventure in this kind of, it's not quite a portal fantasy, but it sort of is. Kell is kind of the insider character of the portal fantasy, and I guess Lila is the character going through the portals. It is much more than that. I would call them kind of action-adventure-y stories. Here is the villain, now we must work out how we're going to solve this problem. Us and our bunch of side characters who we also love. My biggest pro for this series is it has a magic system, which is one of my favourite things. I really enjoy anything with elemental magic as well, which this has. We obviously see Kell's Antari magic in book 1 a lot more than anything else, but book 2 has elemental magical competition-y games, and we get to see one of the characters learning how to do magic, which I cannot stress enough is one of my absolute favourite things in the world. I too, as a person who would love to learn how to use magic, want to be taught how to do it within the book. Am I sad that it doesn't come earlier in book 1? Maybe a little bit, but we do get to learn it in book 2. So I'm satisfied. It's not necessarily a sense of this magic has absolute rules that you as the reader get to know, but you do get the sense that it is a hard magic system. One of my favourite things. Definitely hits the spot for me. I don't know that you get everything explained to you. It's not full Brandon Sanderson, let me give you the charts and tables at the back of the book kind of levels, but it is there. I personally love it. It's just great magic stuff. Again, I think book 2 does that the strongest. We're going to come on to my feelings about each book separately in a bit, but book 2 does that the strongest, mainly because of the way that book 2 is set up. I've written romance in my notes as a pro to talk about, and I do think that is worth talking about. I think it has some really good romantic plot lines throughout the books. I don't want to get into them too much because I do think it gets spoilery just because of where book 1 ends and book 2 begins, and if you've not read book 1 yet, that would probably be a little bit concerning. But I do think V. Schwab manages to crack writing the romance in this one, and I don't necessarily know why. I don't know if I can pin down why it hasn't worked in a lot of her other books but does work in this one. I just think the chemistry these characters have really works, and possibly the fact that it's a trilogy, so it has so much more time to build in the various different romantic relationships, works much better. Or possibly it's just the tone of these books is more suited to it. I don't know that I'm the right person to answer that question, but I do prefer the romance in these books. However, I think more broadly, I want to talk about the relationships in this book. So there's very much a element of the story that is relationship driven, and that can be platonic relationships, that can be sibling relationships, familial, parent, child relationships. I think there's so much in there, friendships even, that, I said platonic, that kind of counts for that. And I think all of those things are written really well, and I very much enjoy seeing how V. Schwab plays with the dynamics between different characters in this series. So for instance, my best example of this that is not going to be a spoiler is Kel's maternal figure in this series. I think is such a fascinating character. I love her, and you don't get that much of her in the series, but what you do get is just full of really rich detail and emotion, and I adore her as a character, and the fact that I do that despite the fact that she features very little in the books overall is proof that her character just has so much to it that we do get to see in the books, even in those small pieces. So I would say if you're a person who really likes that kind of interpersonal stuff going on in your books, this definitely has that. Obviously, it is on the backdrop of big magical things are happening, and, you know, we've got to save the world and we've got to save ourselves and we are at risk of death at every second. But on top of that, complicated emotions about other people. In kind of talking about all of these various V. Schwab books, I've kind of made a distinction between her more thought-based books and her actiony books, and this is the series that I really hold up as more of the example of there can be actiony stuff going on, and I think she is better at writing that. That's just my personal preference and my personal opinion, but I do think the reason I like this series more and the reason I've read this series the most is because it has those fight scenes, those action scenes, those high emotion scenes in a way that the other books really don't feel like they do. Getting to just read magical fight scenes, I would read them all day. Cool stuff happens in these books. They are very much books that feel very cinematic in a lot of ways, where you have big settings and interesting fantastical settings, both in the sense of the world at large, but the smaller world building elements in there as well. I think it was really great for me as a person who's very visual to get those pictures in my mind. It was just a fantastic reading experience. When I read these 4 overbooks, which you'll know if you watch my weekly videos, I actually did them by audiobook. And all I'll say on that is I highly recommend the audiobooks. I think they're well narrated. I think that they manage to capture the characters and the settings really well. I did enjoy reading them physically. I would read them physically again, but just in case you're wondering, do recommend the audiobooks. I think the last thing I'll say as kind of my argument for reading this is I think this is a really great series if you're wanting to get back into fantasy. I've recommended it to a lot of friends, particularly book 1, to a lot of friends who read a lot as young adults, as children, young adults, and then maybe lost that across going to university, which was my experience. And it's just because it's so accessible, because it does have that kind of YA crossover element to it, but without feeling too YA, at least in my opinion. I think it's a really great introductory book, a really accessible book to get into, and I recommend it to a lot of people, and I've so far had very few people who aren't in the kind of bookish sphere dislike it, which is a win for me because normally I kind of get 50-50 people like the things I recommend or not. That being said, there are people I know who haven't got on with these. Typically they have been the people who just don't get on with V. Schwab's writing at all, and I think that's worth noting. If you haven't enjoyed her other books, unless it was for the very specific reason that you felt like there should have been more elemental magic in a kind of Georgian-esque setting, I don't think you will necessarily enjoy these, but you might have to try it and see. But I would say that the people I know who don't like this have traditionally not liked V. Schwab's writing. They are also quite tropey. If you're not a person who enjoys tropey books, not necessarily going to be for you. Again, I think that's a really good recommendation for a certain type of person and for a certain type of situation. I'm personally very much here for a trope. These are almost comfort reads to me for that reason, despite the fact that terrible things happen in a lot of them, and they definitely stamp on my emotions at multiple points, but it's a comforting stamp on my emotions. However, if you don't like that kind of tropey writing, might not be for you. And I think worth saying that it is somewhat light on some aspects of the storytelling. That might be because there are more books to come. We are going to get more books in this world. However, I think as a trilogy, if we just treat it on its own, there are a few just world-building elements that I would personally like even just a short story explaining why a particular thing happened or the background of one particular character and so such. Again, I don't know that that's a bad thing. I think that's a sign that this world has a lot of rich detail to it. But if you're a person who just wants to be handed the complete thing all on one, you're not necessarily going to get that with this. If you read these and you want something else to read, or you like the idea but you want something of a different vein, I actually think in tone, to me, these feel very similar to the Hell's Library books by AJ Hackwith. That kind of bringing together of characters and we're a team who has to complete a task definitely has some of that vibe to it. There's so many fantasy books that feature a magical contest in them. I could list them all here, but I'm not going to. But that kind of thing might be similar as well, particularly to book 2. I said I was going to talk about my feelings on each of the books separately and as a whole. I will come on to that when I've done comparisons. If you were going to read more V.E. Schwab, I would go to Vicious and Vengeful, that duology, before I went to anything else, just because I think that carries that action line through. However, you can also read, I've got them somewhere but they might be downstairs, the Steel Prince comics, which are also in this world. Very quickly, we'll touch on the books separately. Book 1 I really enjoy. I could read it a lot of times and have a wonderful time with it. Book 3 I think is too long. It is a chunky book, but it does have some really great moments in it. Book 2 is my favourite, and that's so rare for me to say. And I think the reason it is my favourite is it avoids the second book slump by basically just saying this is its own separate plot going on from the overarching plot, so we almost kind of jump over it a little bit, and I think that just means that the book stays fresh and exciting and lets us learn more about the world and about the kind of details that we didn't get to have in book 1 because we were trying to do plot things, right? So these magical games, getting to explain magic, getting to meet new characters, getting to introduce new aspects of the world, it just works really well. I really like book 2. So if you've read book 1 and you aren't entirely sold, you could try book 2, depending on what your reasons for not loving book 1 were. Well, I've talked far more than I need to about this. Basically, I think you should read these. I think they're really great. If you don't love V.E. Schwab's writing, obviously that's going to be an issue, but for the most part, I recommend them to everyone, and very few people have not liked them that I've recommended them to, and I'm recommending them to you now. Have you read these? Do you have plans to? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord where we have chill chats about books. I would like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams, and more. If you would like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one.
There's gonna be some bloopers now.
Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and you're watching another episode. Well, one day I'll get it first time. The first book, Gathering of Shadows. Dope.